The gavel drops. Silence. Judge Caprio's face freezes. Wait. Stop. Everyone stop. His hand trembles. The defendant looks up. Their eyes meet. Do I know you? The courtroom holds its breath. Nobody moves. Nobody speaks. And then the judge's voice cracks. My God! Is it really you? What happened next would become the most emotional moment in courtroom history. 30 seconds earlier, it was just another parking violation case. Case number 47 to 2891. Simple. Routine. The kind Judge Frank Caprio had handled thousands of times in his 40 years on the bench in Providence, Rhode Island. The defendant approached the podium. Middle-aged woman. Worn jacket. Tired eyes. She stated her name for the record. And that's when everything stopped. Judge Caprio's pen fell from his hand. The clatter echoed through the silent courtroom. His face went pale. He stood up slowly, gripping the bench for support. What did you just say your name was? His voice was barely a whisper. The woman repeated it, confused by the judge's reaction. But nobody in that courtroom knew that this was the moment Frank Caprio had been waiting for since 1967. Your father. Judge Caprio's voice trembled. What was your father's name? The woman hesitated, clearly confused why a judge was asking about her family history during a parking ticket hearing. Giuseppe, she answered slowly. Giuseppe Ricci. But he passed away when I was 6 years old. Judge Caprio finished her sentence. You were 6 years old. And your mother remarried. Moved to California. Changed your last name. The courtroom erupted in whispers. How could the judge possibly know this? The woman's face went white. How do you know that? Judge Caprio stepped down from the bench. Something he had never done in 40 years. Because Giuseppe Ricci was my best friend. His voice cracked with emotion. We grew up together. Lived on the same street in Federal Hill. And when he died in that construction accident in '67, I made him a promise. Tears began streaming down the judge's face. The bailiff moved forward concerned, but Caprio waved him away. I promised him I would find you. His little girl. Make sure you were okay. But your mother disappeared. No forwarding address. No phone. I searched for years. And here you are. Standing in my courtroom. After 57 years. The woman couldn't speak. She couldn't breathe. Her hands gripped the podium to keep from collapsing. You knew my father? Her voice broke. I barely remember him. I was so young. My mother never talked about him. I don't even have pictures. Judge Caprio wiped his eyes. The entire courtroom was silent. Even the court reporter had stopped typing, tears rolling down her cheeks. I have pictures, Caprio said softly. Boxes of them. Your father and I, we documented everything. Every Sunday dinner. Every neighborhood party. Every moment. He turned to his clerk. Cancel the rest of today's docket. The clerk nodded, tears in his eyes too. But what Judge Caprio did next shocked everyone even more. He removed his robe, walked around the bench, and approached the woman not as a judge, but as a man who had carried a promise for over half a century. Your father, he began, his voice thick with emotion, was the best man I ever knew. When my own father died, Giuseppe stepped in. Taught me how to tie a tie for my first job interview. Lent me money for law school. Stood beside me when I married my wife. The woman's tears flowed freely now. I never knew. My mother said he was just a construction worker. That he wasn't anything special. Not special? Judge Caprio's voice rose with indignation. Your father saved 3 men from a collapsing building the day he died. He went back in when everyone else ran out. He was a hero. And you deserve to know that. The courtroom was completely silent except for the sound of crying. Even the prosecutor was wiping his eyes. The last thing he said to me, Caprio continued, pulling out a worn photograph from his pocket, was take care of my little girl if anything happens to me. I kept this picture of you both. I've carried it for 57 years. He handed her the photograph. A young Giuseppe Ricci holding a 6-year-old girl on his shoulders. Both smiling. Both full of life. The woman's knees buckled. The bailiff rushed forward to steady her. That's my father. She stared at the photo, her hands shaking. I don't remember this day. I don't remember his face. All I had was a name and emptiness. I remember that day, Caprio said softly. 4th of July, 1966. Federal Hill Festival. He won you that stuffed rabbit at the ring toss. You carried it everywhere for months. Subscribe now and comment if you believe in the power of keeping promises, because what Judge Caprio did next will restore your faith in humanity. Judge Caprio gestured to his clerk. Bring my personal photo albums from my chambers. All of them. As they waited, he continued. Your father talked about you constantly. Every dream he had was for you. College education. Wedding day. Grandchildren. He worked double shifts so your mother could stay home with you. My mother said he abandoned us. The woman whispered. She said he left and never came back. He didn't abandon you. Caprio's voice was firm now. He died trying to save others. And your mother. I think her grief was so profound, she couldn't bear to remember. So she erased everything. The clerk returned with 3 large albums. Judge Caprio opened the first one. This is your first birthday party. Your father saved for 3 months to afford that cake. He turned the page. This is your baptism. He was so proud, he invited the entire neighborhood. Another page. This is Christmas 1965. See that dollhouse? He built it himself. Worked on it every night for 2 months in my basement so you wouldn't see it. The woman collapsed into a chair, overwhelmed. I had nothing. No memories. No connection. Just a name on a death certificate. You had more than you knew, Caprio said gently. Your father's best friend became a judge. And he spent 57 years looking for you to fulfill a promise. That's your inheritance. That's who your father was. But nobody in that courtroom knew there was more to the story. Judge Caprio motioned to the prosecutor. The parking ticket. What was the violation? The prosecutor, still emotional, checked his notes. Parking in a hospital zone. St. Joseph's Hospital. Caprio's face changed. Why were you at St. Joseph's? The woman hesitated. My daughter. She's in the ICU. I parked illegally because I was terrified. She has the same heart condition that supposedly killed my father. The courtroom gasped. Judge Caprio sat down, stunned. Your father didn't die from a heart condition, he said slowly. Where did you hear that? My mother said he had a weak heart. That's why he died in the accident. That's why I'm terrified, my daughter. Your father had the strongest heart of anyone I knew, Caprio interrupted. He died from trauma, not heart failure. Medical examiner's report said he had the heart of an athlete. The relief on the woman's face was overwhelming. My daughter, she might be okay? The condition might not even be genetic, Caprio said. But more importantly, we're going to make sure she gets the best care possible. He turned to his clerk. Get me Dr. Morrison at Rhode Island Hospital on the phone. Now. What Judge Caprio did next would change everything. Within minutes, he had arranged for the state's top pediatric cardiologist to consult on the case. Not as a judge using his position, but as a man honoring a promise to his best friend. Your father would want his granddaughter to have every chance, Caprio said. And I'm going to make sure she does. The woman was sobbing openly now. I don't understand. Why would you do all this for strangers? You're not strangers. Caprio's voice was firm. Your father was my brother in everything but blood. That makes you family. And family takes care of family. He picked up the parking ticket and tore it in half. Case dismissed. And before you leave Providence, you're coming to my house for Sunday dinner. I want you to meet my children. I want them to know Giuseppe's daughter. I want you to see all the photographs. Hear all the stories. Know your father the way he deserved to be known." The courtroom erupted in applause. But Judge Caprio wasn't finished. He looked directly at the woman. "Your father's grave. Do you know where it is?" She shook her head. "My mother never told me. Mount Calvary Cemetery. Section C, Plot 247. I visit every year on the anniversary. I tell him about my life, my children, my cases. And every year I tell him I'm still looking for his little girl." Tears streamed down his face again. "Tomorrow we're going together. And I'm going to tell him I finally kept my promise." The woman stood on shaky legs and walked toward the bench. Judge Caprio met her halfway. They embraced in the middle of the courtroom. Two strangers connected by a promise made 57 years ago. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for remembering him. For remembering me. I could never forget," Caprio replied. "Giuseppe Ricci was the best man I ever knew. And keeping my promise to him has been the honor of my life." The bailiff had to call a 15-minute recess. Nobody in the courtroom could compose themselves. As court staff began to leave, the prosecutor approached Judge Caprio quietly. "Your Honor, in 20 years of practicing law, I've never seen anything like this. The odds of her walking into your courtroom weren't odds," Caprio said firmly. "Giuseppe always said everything happens for a reason. Maybe he's been guiding her here all along." The next day, Judge Caprio and Giuseppe's daughter stood at the grave together. She placed flowers on the headstone. For the first time in 57 years, Giuseppe Ricci's daughter knew her father's story. Knew he was a hero. Knew he was loved. Knew he had never abandoned her. "Tell me more about him," she said to Caprio. "I want to know everything." And Frank Caprio did. He spent 4 hours at that cemetery, sharing every memory, every joke, every moment of Giuseppe Ricci's too short life. Share this video if you believe some promises are sacred. Comment what you would have done in Judge Caprio's position. Your engagement helps us share more stories of humanity and honor. 3 weeks later, the woman's daughter was released from the hospital. The consultation Judge Caprio arranged had identified a treatable condition. Not genetic. Not fatal. Just treatable. She sent Judge Caprio a photo. Her daughter holding the same stuffed rabbit her grandfather had won at the carnival in 1966. Caprio had kept it all these years. "For your daughter," his note had said. "From her great-grandfather Giuseppe, who would have loved her more than life itself." 6 months later, Judge Caprio officiated at a small ceremony. Not a wedding. Not a trial. But a dedication of a memorial bench in Federal Hill, Providence's Italian neighborhood. The plaque read, "Giuseppe Ricci 1935 to 1967. Hero, father, friend. A man who lived for others and died saving others. Never forgotten by those who loved him." At the ceremony, Giuseppe's daughter spoke publicly about her father for the first time. "I grew up thinking I was abandoned. That I came from nothing. That my father didn't care enough to stay." Her voice was strong despite the tears. "But I learned I come from a hero. From a man who saved lives. From someone who inspired such loyalty that his best friend spent 57 years keeping a promise." She turned to Judge Caprio. "And I learned that family isn't just blood. It's the promises we keep. The love we honor. The memories we preserve. Judge Caprio gave me back my father. And I will spend the rest of my life making sure my children know what kind of men Giuseppe Ricci and Frank Caprio are." Judge Caprio stood, tears streaming down his face, and embraced her. "Your father is smiling down right now," he whispered. "I kept my promise, Giuseppe. Your little girl knows who you were. And she's going to make sure your great-grandchildren know too." The small crowd applauded. But this wasn't about recognition. It was about love. About loyalty. About a promise that transcended death itself. That night, in his chambers, Judge Caprio updated his will. He left Giuseppe's daughter all the photographs. all the albums, all the memories of her father that he had preserved for 57 years. But more than that, he left her something priceless, the knowledge that she came from greatness, that her father was a hero, that she was loved beyond measure. And he left one final instruction. When I die, bury me next to Giuseppe. Brothers in life. Brothers in death. As it should have been all along. The story spread far beyond Providence. National news picked it up. Judge keeps 57-year promise to fallen friend. The video of the courtroom moment went viral. Millions watched. Millions cried. Millions were reminded that honor and loyalty still exist in this world. But for Frank Caprio and Giuseppe's daughter, it wasn't about fame. It was about family. About promises kept. About love that transcends time and death and separation. Every Sunday, they now have dinner together. Giuseppe's daughter and her family. Judge Caprio and his family. United by a bond forged in tragedy but strengthened by honor. And at every dinner, before the meal begins, they raise a glass to Giuseppe Ricci, the construction worker who saved 3 lives. The father who loved his daughter more than anything. The friend who inspired 57 years of loyalty. The parking ticket that brought them together remains framed on Judge Caprio's wall. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder. A reminder that justice isn't just about laws and penalties. It's about recognizing our common humanity. About seeing beyond the case to the person. About honoring the promises that make us human. And most importantly, it's a reminder that some promises are sacred. Giuseppe Ricci asked his best friend to take care of his little girl. And Frank Caprio spent 57 years searching, waiting, keeping the faith. Until the moment she walked into his courtroom. The odds were astronomical. The chances infinitesimal. But Giuseppe's daughter believes her father guided her there. That he made sure she would find the one person who could give her back her history. And Judge Caprio believes it too. Because in 57 years, he had handled tens of thousands of cases. But only one defendant had Giuseppe Ricci's eyes. His smile. His spirit. The recognition was instant. The connection was undeniable. The promise was finally fulfilled. As Judge Caprio often says now, justice is blind, but love sees everything. And a promise made to a dying friend is the most sacred obligation a person can have. He kept that promise. And in doing so, he didn't just change one woman's life. He reminded an entire world that honor, loyalty, and love still matter. That some bonds can never be broken. That some promises can never be forgotten. And that sometimes, against all odds, the universe brings us exactly where we need to be. Giuseppe's little girl finally came home. And Frank Caprio could finally rest, knowing he had honored his best friend's dying wish. The promise was kept. The family was restored. And 2 lives, separated by tragedy and time, were finally reunited by the power of unwavering loyalty and love that transcends death itself. Years later, Giuseppe's great-granddaughter would ask Judge Caprio about that day in court. "Nonno Frank," she called him, using the Italian word for grandfather. "How did you know it was her? After so many years?" Judge Caprio smiled, pulling out that worn photograph he still carried. "Some connections run deeper than memory, child. Your great-grandfather Giuseppe and we were connected here." He placed his hand over his heart. "And when his daughter walked into my courtroom, I felt him. As clearly as if he was standing right beside me, saying, 'There she is, Frank. There's my little girl. Take care of her.'" The girl looked at the photograph of her great-grandfather holding her grandmother. "Do you think he knew? That you would find her?" "I think he arranged it," Caprio said softly. "Giuseppe always had a way of making things happen. Even from heaven." The courtroom where it all happened has become a place of pilgrimage. People come from across the country, hoping to witness Judge Caprio's unique brand of justice. Justice tempered with mercy. Justice guided by humanity. Justice that sees the person, not just the case. And sometimes, when the courtroom is quiet, staff members swear they can feel a presence. A gentle, watchful presence. As if Giuseppe Ricci himself stands guard, ensuring his best friend continues the work they both believed in, treating every person with dignity, compassion, and respect. The legacy extends beyond one family reunion. Judge Caprio's approach to justice has inspired judges across America. They've learned that the bench isn't just about punishment. It's about understanding. About recognizing that behind every case file is a human story. A struggle. A hope. A need for compassion. Giuseppe taught me that, Caprio often says in his speeches. He taught me that we're all connected. That every person matters. That kindness isn't weakness, it's the highest form of strength. And so the promise that began in 1967 continues to ripple outward. Every life Judge Caprio touches with compassion. Every defendant who leaves his courtroom with dignity restored. Every family reunited, every burden eased, every moment of grace, all of it traces back to Giuseppe Ricci. To a construction worker who died saving others. To a friend who promised to care for a little girl. To a judge who spent 57 years keeping that promise. To a reunion that reminded the world what true loyalty looks like. The story of Judge Frank Caprio and Giuseppe Ricci's daughter isn't just about one remarkable day in court. It's about the power of promises, the strength of friendship, the miracle of faith, and the undeniable truth that love, real, unconditional, self-sacrificing love, can transcend anything. Even death. Even time. Even 57 years of separation. Giuseppe Ricci saved 3 lives the day he died. But through Frank Caprio's unwavering loyalty, he saved one more, his daughter's. He gave her back her history, her identity, her father's love. And in doing so, he showed us all that the bonds we forge in life can never truly be broken. That the promises we make to those we love are the most sacred obligations we can have. And that sometimes, in the most unexpected moments, the universe conspires to bring us exactly what we need. A parking ticket brought them together. But it was 57 years of unwavering promise that made the reunion possible. Judge Frank Caprio could have forgotten. Could have moved on. Could have convinced himself that he'd done enough. But he didn't. Because to Giuseppe Ricci's best friend, a promise was a promise. And some promises are worth keeping for a lifetime. As kept. The family was restored. And 2 lives, separated by tragedy and time, were finally reunited by the power of unwavering loyalty and love that transcends death itself.